Direct News TV. June 8, 2024. Israel's war on Gaza live, nightmare as hospitals cope with Nuseirat dead. Gaza's government media office says the Israeli massacre at the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza killed 210 Palestinians and wounded more than 400. Doctors Without Borders, MSF, says Al-Aqsa Hospital in central Gaza is a nightmare, treating an overwhelming number of severely injured patients, many of whom are women and children, after the Israeli attack on Nuseirat. Israeli military free total 7 captives, negotiations freed more than 100, rights expert. Kenneth Roth, the former executive director of Human Rights Watch and a visiting professor at Princeton University, spoke to Al Jazeera earlier about the Israeli attack on the Nuseirat refugee camp. This rescue operation means that a total of 7 captives have been released alive because of Israeli military operations. Whereas over 100 have been released through negotiations, Roth said. At this stage, Netanyahu is a major obstacle to concluding negotiations with Hamas because he does not want to agree to a long-term permanent ceasefire that Hamas is insisting on. And that's very clear. Netanyahu needs a forever war. Once the war stops, he then faces a political reckoning for the intelligence failure of October 7. Why were Israeli soldiers much more focused on the West Bank, protecting settlers than on adjacent to Gaza? These are questions that could easily topple his government and end him up in prison. Video captures moment of Israel's massacre in Nuseirat refugee camp. The video footage, obtained and verified by our colleagues at Al Jazeera Arabic, shows the terrifying moments when Israeli missiles slammed into the Nuseirat refugee camp in an attack on Saturday, which killed 210 people, wounded more than 400 and has been described as a massacre. People scream as they run for cover while missiles rain down as part of an Israel operation that released 4 captives held in Gaza by Hamas fighters. Nasser Hospital treating overwhelming number of severely injured, MSF. Here's more from Doctors Without Borders, MSF, which says its medical staff are helping to treat an overwhelming number of severely injured patients at Al-Aqsa and Nasser hospitals in central Gaza. In 1 hour, we've received about 50 badly injured patients, said Chris Hook, the MSF medical referent at Nasser Hospital. There are people with multiple major open fractures. We've got several unconscious children. The intensive care unit is full, and more patients are arriving, Hook said. Israeli attack on Nuseirat did not take precautions to spare civilians, rights expert. More from Kenneth Roth, the former executive director of HRS and a visiting professor at Princeton University, who spoke with Al Jazeera earlier. I think we have to first recognize that while the numbers currently are at least 210 killed and over 400 wounded, we don't have a breakdown yet of how many of those were fighters versus civilians, Roth told Al Jazeera. There clearly was a firefight. So I think we can't draw definitive conclusions until we know a bit more, Roth said. But there are certain conclusions that we can reach. For example, the Israeli military said that it deliberately launched this rescue operation during the day, hoping to surprise Hamas. Hamas would have expected it to come at night, Roth said. The one problem with operating during the day is that civilians are all about. And some of the bombs clearly fell either on or right adjacent to a market in Al-Nuseirat which was filled with people, he said. And in those circumstances, you predictably will get larger numbers of civilian casualties than if it had been a nighttime operation. That is inconsistent with the duty to take all feasible precautions to spare civilians harm. Investigation needed for claims Israel used humanitarian work cover during Nuseirat attack. Kenneth Roth, the former executive director of Human Rights Watch and a visiting professor at Princeton University, said claims that Israeli forces may have used the disguise of humanitarian aid workers during the Nuseirat refugee camp attack need to be investigated. We don't really know what vehicles were used. The initial allegation was that humanitarian vehicles were used and that, clearly, would be illegal. That would endanger humanitarian workers. Now Israel denied that, Roth told Al Jazeera. So I think we don't know, Roth said. But what we do know is that an investigation is needed to ensure that this was not an effort to pose as humanitarian workers or medical workers or some kind of protected worker. Because the use of such vehicles would then endanger these people, he said. Israel could have rescued captives without killing Palestinian children, Guy Pearce. Australian actor Guy Pearce has said he is pleased hostages are home but that it doesn't mean unnecessary Palestinian deaths should be forgotten. We know the Israeli military could have brought all the hostages home months ago and avoided the senseless murder of innocent Palestinian children, Pearce said in a post on X. We know their true motivation, he added. Vanity Fair France recently apologized after publishing a photograph of Pearce that edited out a Palestinian flag pin he was wearing. U.S. military denies Gaza aid pier had role in Nuseirat camp attack. The U.S. Central Command, which is responsible for U.S. forces in the Middle East, said the Gaza aid pier played no role in Israel's attack on the Nuseirat refugee camp, which killed 210 people and wounded hundreds during a military raid to free 4 Israeli captives. The humanitarian pier facility, including its equipment, personnel, and assets were not used in the operation to rescue hostages today in Gaza, CENTCOM said in a post on social media. An area south of the facility was used by the Israelis to safely return the hostages to Israel. Any such claim to the contrary is false. The temporary pier on the coast of Gaza was put in place for one purpose only, to help move additional, urgently needed life-saving assistance into Gaza. The pier was returned to the Gaza coast on Friday from repairs in Israel after suffering damage during bad weather last month. Several dead, wounded in Israeli attack on Gaza City. Earlier, we reported that Gaza civil defense crews were responding to a distress call from the Daraj neighborhood of Gaza City, where it said a home next to a medical clinic was hit by Israeli warplanes. Al Jazeera's correspondent in Gaza is now reporting that at least 1 Palestinian is dead and 7 wounded in that attack. The wounded include children, our correspondent said. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.